they need to go get? Well, the next best thing, I suppose. Caitlyn Clark. Caitlyn Clark will join NBC Sports as a special contributor for the newly launched Basketball Night in America on February 1st, preceding the Lakers-Knicks game at Madison Square Garden. It will be CC's first time in an analyst-type role on TV. She will return to the show on March 29th, preceding Knicks Thunder in Oklahoma City. She is joining a studio.
This wasn't supposed to happen. NBC had no plans for a disruption. The NBA didn't anticipate what was coming, and the WNBA certainly didn't want this conversation unfolding on live television. But on February 1st, 2026, everything changed. When Caitlyn Clark took her seat in the NBC Sports studio for Basketball Night in America, she didn't just join a broadcast panel. She triggered something much bigger, something that couldn't be controlled, contained, or spun away. Within minutes, social media exploded. Viewership numbers surged beyond projections. Clips spread faster than playoff highlights. And suddenly, the entire basketball world was watching, not a game, but her.
So the WNBA are not going to be happy with this. That's all I'm going to say. They are absolutely positively not going to be happy with this right here. Oh, Jesus, did I say weeks? I mean years. It's getting to the stage now where it's just been so long that I'm forgetting. Like, this narrative has been going on for weeks, months, years, and it's never going to stop. Caitlyn Clark could win 10 rings and they're still going to complain about her not winning in high school. Like, I just mean it where it's like, these people, none of this is relevant to anything. Like, it is funny in terms of the.
The announcement came on January 26th, just days before the debut. NBC Sports revealed that Caitlyn Clark, the Indiana Fever superstar who dominated headlines for years, would join their newly launched Basketball Night in America as a special contributor. Not for a trial run, not for a guest appearance buried in the schedule, for the launch, the debut broadcast. Lakers versus Knicks at Madison Square Garden, one of the most iconic matchups in basketball. Executive producer Sam Flood made the announcement with carefully chosen words that sent shockwaves through the industry. He called Clark one of the most captivating players and dynamic scorers in basketball. Not women's basketball, not the WNBA. Basketball, period. That distinction mattered more than most people realized in the moment. Before we dive deeper into what happened that night and why it created so much controversy, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We're breaking down the biggest stories in basketball, the moments that changed the game, and the reactions nobody else is talking about. Drop a like if you're already hooked, because what comes next is going to blow your mind. The choice to feature Clark on opening night wasn't random. NBC could have eased her into the role, given her a smaller game, tested the waters quietly. Instead, they went all in. Lakers and Knicks, primetime, maximum visibility. That decision told everyone exactly what NBC thought about her drawing power. They weren't experimenting. They were making a statement. And the basketball world took notice immediately.
That Clark, the Indiana Fever star with an enormous following within the game, is joining the network's pregame coverage for its debut of Sunday Night Basketball this weekend when the Los Angeles Lakers play the New York Knicks at Madison Square Garden. The debut. They picked her to kick it off. Not, yeah, it'll do a couple weeks and then you'll come in. No. We need you to launch this thing, dude. We need you to kick this off, CC. And if you remember, Peacock, NBC Universal, they love themselves for some Caitlyn Clark. You remember Caitlyn Clark's senior year? I forget which scoring record it was. Maybe somebody in the comments can correct me.
Analysts started debating whether this was brilliant marketing or risky business. Fans argued about whether she deserved the platform. But behind closed doors, people in the WNBA were reportedly asking a different question. Why does she get this opportunity when so many other talented players don't? Sam Flood's comments in the press release revealed even more. He said Clark had cameras pointed at her for years and always put on a show with a basketball in her hand. He praised her thoughtfulness in interviews and her natural ability to communicate complex ideas. But the most telling part was his excitement about her platform. He wasn't talking about giving her a chance. He was talking about what she would bring to their broadcast. That's a critical difference. NBC wasn't doing Clark a favor. They needed her. They wanted the attention she commanded, the audience she drew, the energy she created, and they were willing to feature her prominently to get it.
Flood said he's convinced Clark can handle this new role. Quote, she's had cameras pointed at her for years, and she certainly always put on a show with a basketball in her hand. And after a game ends, she's always a great interview, Flood said. She's always so thoughtful in everything she says, and to have the ability to do that on this platform with this team, it's going to be a lot of fun to listen to. That's the beauty of who she is. Clark has dabbled in sports broadcasting before, going viral once for attempting to do some play-by-play while watching the Philadelphia Phillies, not knowing Fever teammate Lexi Hull was secretly recording her. Furthermore, Clark was actually in the booth, not doing play-by-play, but in the booth for a Yankees game, her rookie season, after her rookie season. She was in the booth doing a Yankees game. She went to the locker room, pictured with Aaron Judge.
February 1st arrived. The moment everyone had been anticipating. Clark appeared on screen alongside the broadcast panel, not as a nervous newcomer, but as someone who belonged. She didn't look grateful to be there. She didn't appear overwhelmed by the spotlight. She looked comfortable, dangerously comfortable. And that's when people realized this wasn't going to be a typical feel-good story about representation. This was something else entirely. From her first comments, Clark commanded the room. She broke down plays with precision, explaining spacing, ball movement, and defensive rotations like someone who'd been studying film for decades. She didn't wait for permission to speak. She anticipated questions, offered insights before being asked, and corrected assumptions when analysts made points she disagreed with. Other panelists, some of them Hall of Famers with years of broadcasting experience, visibly reacted. You could see it in their expressions. The slight pause, the surprise, the realization that this wasn't a publicity stunt. She knew what she was talking about, and she wasn't afraid to prove it. But the real story wasn't happening in the studio. It was happening online. Within the first commercial break, social media had already caught fire. Clips of her analysis started circulating immediately. Fans posted reactions, breakdown videos, commentary threads. The engagement numbers climbed so fast that analytics teams at NBC were reportedly stunned. This wasn't gradual growth. This was an explosion. And by the time the Lakers-Knicks game tipped off, Caitlyn Clark's name was trending higher than the game itself. The viewership data revealed something even more shocking. Her segment outperformed the surrounding NBA content. People tuned in specifically to watch her, then stayed for the game. Clips of her breaking down plays generated more engagement than highlights from the actual Lakers-Knicks matchup. That's when the phrase started spreading across social media again. The Caitlyn Clark effect. It wasn't new. The term had been used throughout 2024 and 2025 to describe the unprecedented ratings surge she brought to the WNBA. But now it was crossing over into NBA coverage. And that made people very uncomfortable. To understand why her NBC debut created so much tension, you need to understand the numbers she'd already put up. During the 2024 WNBA season, her rookie year, something historic happened. 23 WNBA games drew over 1 million viewers that season. Clark played in 20 of them. That's not a coincidence. That's dominance. Games she didn't play in rarely broke the million-viewer mark. Games she did play in consistently shattered expectations. She single-handedly changed what was possible for women's basketball ratings. And everyone in the industry knew it. Her impact went beyond just attendance and television. Merchandise sales exploded. Indiana Fever ticket prices skyrocketed. Arenas that normally sat half empty were selling out within minutes when her team came to town. The WNBA experienced growth it had been chasing for decades, all concentrated around one player. And while the league publicly celebrated the increased attention, privately, tensions were building because the growth wasn't evenly distributed. It was centered on her, and that created a problem the league didn't know how to solve. The issue wasn't that Clark was popular. The issue was how much more popular she was than everyone else. In a league that had long promoted the narrative of collective growth and team success over individual stardom, her dominance disrupted everything. Marketing campaigns emphasized the league as a whole. Media coverage was carefully balanced to feature multiple players. But fans didn't care about the messaging. They cared about watching Caitlyn Clark. And when she showed up on NBC's primetime NBA coverage, it exposed a truth the WNBA had been trying to manage for years. One star, if big enough, can change everything. NBC's decision to position her not as a WNBA guest, but as a basketball authority, amplified the tension even further. She wasn't introduced as WNBA star Caitlyn Clark joining us tonight. She was presented as an analyst. A contributor, someone whose expertise mattered regardless of where she played. That positioning was intentional. NBC treated her the way they'd treat any other respected basketball mind. And for many people watching, especially young women who'd grown up seeing female athletes relegated to separate lesser coverage, it was revolutionary. But for others, it felt threatening. Because if one player could command this much mainstream attention, what did that say about everyone else? If Caitlyn Clark could analyze NBA games on primetime television and draw bigger numbers than the games themselves, where did that leave the rest of the WNBA? These weren't comfortable questions, and they certainly weren't questions anyone wanted to answer publicly. According to multiple reports, behind-the-scenes reactions were mixed. Some WNBA players celebrated her success, recognizing that her visibility helped everyone. Others were frustrated, feeling like years of hard work and talent were being overlooked in favor of one person. And some were angry, believing the media's obsession with Clark was unfair and damaging to the league's collective growth. None of these reactions were wrong. They were all understandable responses to a complicated situation, but they revealed a deeper conflict that had been simmering for years. The debate always came back to the same question. Why her? What made Caitlyn Clark so uniquely capable of drawing attention that other incredibly talented players couldn't? The answers were complicated. Her college career at Iowa had been spectacular, breaking scoring records and leading her team to back-to-back championship game appearances. Her playing style was dynamic, featuring long-range shooting and creative passing that translated beautifully to highlights. Her personality was confident without being arrogant, competitive without being unlikable, and her timing was perfect, entering the WNBA at a moment when women's sports were finally getting serious investment and media attention. But there was something else, something harder to quantify: presence. When Caitlyn Clark was on screen, people watched. When she spoke, people listened. When she played, casual fans who'd never cared about women's basketball suddenly tuned in. That kind of magnetism can't be manufactured. It can't be taught. And it can't be evenly distributed across a roster or a league. It just exists. And Clark had it. During the broadcast, NBC featured a pre-recorded segment showing Clark playing a game of PIG with Jamal Crawford, a former NBA star known for his incredible ball handling skills. The segment was lighthearted, fun, and showed her personality outside of analysis. But it also reinforced something important. She wasn't being treated as an outsider trying to prove she belonged. She was being treated as a peer, someone who could joke around with NBA legends and hold her own. That casualness, that comfort, sent a message that resonated with millions of viewers. Her actual analysis during the broadcast impressed even skeptics. When breaking down offensive sets, she didn't just describe what happened. She explained why it happened. She pointed out defensive mistakes before the play developed. She predicted adjustments coaches would make at halftime. This wasn't surface-level commentary designed to fill airtime. This was legitimate expertise, and it became clear very quickly that NBC hadn't hired her for her name recognition alone. She could actually do the job. The timing of her NBC debut made everything even more complicated. As Clark was sitting in that studio analyzing NBA games, the WNBA was in the middle of a serious labor dispute. The collective bargaining agreement was being negotiated, and tensions were high. Players were pushing for better salaries, improved travel conditions, and more investment from the league. There was legitimate concern that if negotiations failed, the 2026 season might not happen at all. And into that tense environment came Caitlyn Clark, appearing on primetime television, demonstrating her value extended far beyond the WNBA. Some observers pointed out the uncomfortable optics. While WNBA players were fighting for better pay and conditions, their biggest star was showcasing her ability to succeed in mainstream sports media. It raised questions about leverage. If Clark could build a media career outside the WNBA, did that give her more negotiating power? Did it make the league more or less willing to meet player demands? Did it help or hurt the collective bargaining effort? These questions didn't have easy answers, and they highlighted the complex relationship between individual success and collective progress. NBC announced that Clark would return to Basketball Night in America on March 29th for the Thunder vs. Knicks game in Oklahoma City. That announcement came quickly, suggesting her debut had exceeded expectations. Networks don't rush to book return appearances unless the numbers justify it, and clearly, the numbers were there. But the announcement also meant this wasn't a one-time experiment. NBC was building her into their basketball coverage. They were creating a recurring role, and that meant her presence in mainstream NBA media was becoming permanent. The implications of that permanence were staggering. For years, women's basketball had fought for visibility, for respect, for equal treatment in sports media. Progress had been slow and frustrating. Games were buried on secondary channels. Highlights were skipped on sports shows. Analysis was superficial or non-existent. But now, one of the WNBA's biggest stars, was being featured prominently on primetime NBA coverage. Not in a separate women's sports segment. Not as a novelty. As an analyst whose insights mattered. That was progress. Real, undeniable progress. But it was progress concentrated in one person. And that created tension. Critics argued that Clark's success shouldn't come at the expense of other women's basketball coverage. Supporters countered that her mainstream visibility helped everyone by proving women could succeed in traditional sports media. Both perspectives had merit. But they also revealed a fundamental disagreement about how progress should happen. Should the focus be on lifting everyone equally, even if that meant slower growth? Or should exceptional talent be elevated aggressively, even if that created disparities? The basketball world had been debating these questions for years. Clark's NBC debut forced the conversation into the spotlight. What made her situation unique was that she didn't seem interested in the politics. She didn't release statements about representation or breaking barriers. She didn't frame her NBC appearance as a victory for women's sports. She just showed up, did the job, and let her work speak for itself. That approach resonated with some people and frustrated others. Those who appreciated it saw confidence and professionalism. Those who were frustrated saw missed opportunities to advocate for other women. Both interpretations were valid. Both revealed different expectations about what successful women in sports owed to those coming behind them. The social media reaction to her debut split along predictable lines. Fans celebrated her success, posting clips with captions about how she was changing the game. Critics questioned why she was getting opportunities other talented women weren't. Casual viewers who'd never watched the WNBA suddenly became interested in learning more about her. And NBA fans, some of whom had dismissed women's basketball entirely, found themselves impressed by her analysis. That last group was particularly significant. If Clark could win over skeptics, if she could earn respect from people who'd never given women's basketball a chance, that opened doors for everyone. But respect came with pressure. Every time she appeared on NBC, she was being evaluated not just as an analyst, but as a representative. Fair or not, people were watching to see if she could maintain the standard she'd set. One bad appearance, one awkward moment, one analytical mistake could shift the narrative immediately. That's the burden of being first, of breaking barriers, of succeeding in spaces that weren't designed for you. You don't just have to be good, you have to be flawless. And that pressure never goes away. The business implications of her NBC deal were massive. Networks were now competing for her time and attention. If NBC's basketball coverage benefited from her presence, other broadcasters would want in. Sponsors would see the engagement numbers and chase partnerships. Media opportunities would multiply. And all of that translated into leverage. Not just for Clark, but potentially for the WNBA as a whole. Because if networks were willing to pay for her specifically, that affected what the league could demand in future media rights negotiations. Some analysts predicted that Clark's mainstream success would ultimately benefit the WNBA by proving the marketability of women's basketball. Others worried it would create resentment and division within the league. Both predictions were probably true. Progress is rarely clean. It's messy and complicated and creates winners and losers, even when everyone theoretically benefits. The question wasn't whether Clark's success would have downsides. It was whether the upsides outweighed them. What couldn't be argued was the magnitude of what happened on February 1st. A WNBA player appeared on primetime NBA coverage and dominated the conversation. She didn't just participate, she led. She didn't just contribute, she commanded attention. And she did it so effectively that people started questioning what else was possible. If she could succeed as an NBA analyst, what other doors could open? If she could draw ratings for NBC's basketball coverage, what did that mean for future broadcasting opportunities? The possibilities seemed endless. The response from NBA players and coaches was largely positive. Several current players posted supportive messages on social media. Coaches praised her basketball IQ in interviews. That acceptance mattered. It signaled that she'd earned respect from the highest level of the sport. And it made it harder for critics to dismiss her presence as a publicity stunt. When NBA players themselves were saying she knew what she was talking about, that carried weight. But the WNBA's official response was notably measured. The league issued a brief statement congratulating Clark on the opportunity. No big celebration. No detailed press release. Just a simple acknowledgement. That restraint spoke volumes. The league was in a difficult position. Celebrating too enthusiastically might seem like they were prioritizing one player over others. Saying nothing would look petty and small. So they split the difference with a minimal response that satisfied nobody but avoided major controversy. What happens next depends on factors beyond anyone's control. Will Clark continue succeeding as an analyst? Will NBC expand her role? Will other networks make competing offers? Will the WNBA season even happen given the labor dispute? All of these questions remain unanswered. But what's already clear is that February 1st, 2026 marked a turning point. Not just for Caitlyn Clark, but for how mainstream sports media engages with women's basketball. The uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to say out loud is that individual stars matter more than leagues want to admit. The WNBA has spent years promoting collective growth, team success, and league-wide development. But fans don't fall in love with leagues. They fall in love with players. They buy tickets to watch specific people do extraordinary things. They tune in because someone captures their imagination. And Caitlyn Clark has captured imaginations on a scale the WNBA has never seen before. That doesn't diminish the talent of other players. It doesn't mean she's the only one worth watching. It just means she's the one who broke through. And now that she has, the question becomes what everyone else does with the opportunity her success created. Because whether people like it or not, she's opened doors. She's proven women's basketball can draw mainstream attention. She's demonstrated that female analysts can succeed on NBA coverage. And she's shown that the audience is there if the product connects. The backlash she's faced, both subtle and explicit, reveals deeper anxieties about success, fairness, and opportunity in women's sports. When resources are scarce and visibility is limited, every success story feels like it comes at someone else's expense. When one player gets a primetime NBC role, it highlights how many others don't. When one athlete commands unprecedented attention, it makes everyone else feel invisible by comparison. These feelings are valid, but they're also symptomatic of a system that hasn't invested enough in women's sports to create abundant opportunities for everyone. If you've made it this far, you're clearly invested in this story. Do me a favor and drop a comment below telling me what you think. Is Caitlyn Clark's mainstream success good for the WNBA, or does it create more problems than it solves? Are we watching history being made, or are we seeing one player get elevated at everyone else's expense? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this story is far from over. We'll be tracking every development, every reaction, and every moment that changes the game. The bigger picture here goes beyond basketball. What we're witnessing is a test case for how mainstream sports media integrates women's sports. For decades, women's athletics have been treated as separate, lesser, niche content. Relegated to secondary channels, given minimal coverage, analyzed superficially if at all. But Caitlyn Clark's NBC debut challenged that model. She appeared on primetime NBA coverage and proved she belonged. She earned respect not through sympathy or tokenism, but through competence and expertise. And she did it on one of the biggest stages in sports media. That matters because it sets a precedent. If she can succeed, others can follow. If NBC's ratings justify her role, other networks will create similar opportunities. If audiences respond positively to women analyzing men's sports, the industry will adapt. Progress in media happens slowly, through incremental changes and proven successes. Clark's debut on February 1st was one of those moments that could accelerate the timeline. But progress also creates backlash. There will always be people uncomfortable with change, with women entering spaces traditionally reserved for men, with challenges to established hierarchies. Clark will face criticism that male analysts never encounter. She'll be scrutinized more harshly, questioned more frequently, and expected to represent all women in sports media, even though that's an impossible burden. That's the reality of being first. You don't just have to succeed. You have to succeed despite obstacles others don't face. The March 29th appearance will be crucial. If she performs at the same level, it confirms the February 1st debut wasn't a fluke. If engagement remains high, NBC will almost certainly expand her role. And if she continues earning respect from NBA players, coaches, and fans, it becomes harder to dismiss her presence as anything other than deserved. But if she struggles, if the novelty wears off, if ratings decline, the narrative will shift immediately. That's the precarious nature of breakthrough moments. They can be launching pads or isolated peaks. Only time reveals which. What's already undeniable is that Caitlyn Clark has changed the conversation. Before her NBC debut, discussions about women in sports media centered on hypotheticals and possibilities. Now they center on reality and results. She's proven it can be done. She's demonstrated that audiences will watch, engage, and respond. And she's shown that women can analyze basketball at the highest level without qualification or asterisk. Those aren't small accomplishments. They're foundational shifts that will ripple through the industry for years. The WNBA finds itself in an impossible position. The league's biggest star is building a mainstream media career that doesn't depend on the WNBA existing. If labor negotiations fail and the season is canceled, Clark still has NBC. She still has endorsements. She still has opportunities that extend beyond the league. That's leverage most WNBA players don't have. And it complicates the collective bargaining process in ways nobody fully understands yet. Some argue that Clark should use her platform to advocate for WNBA players during negotiations. Others believe she should focus on her own career and let the union handle collective bargaining. Both perspectives miss the nuance. Clark's success already advocates for women's basketball by proving its value. Her NBC role demonstrates marketability that strengthens every WNBA player's position. But she also has no obligation to sacrifice personal opportunities for collective benefit. That tension between individual achievement and group progress has defined women's sports for decades. It's not resolving anytime soon. What we're watching unfold is bigger than one broadcast, one player, or one moment. We're watching the evolution of how sports media treats women's athletics. For years, progress has been incremental. Small increases in coverage, gradual improvements in investment, slow shifts in perception. But Caitlyn Clark's trajectory has been anything but incremental. It's been explosive. And explosive growth creates opportunities and challenges in equal measure. The opportunities are obvious. More visibility for women's basketball. More media roles for female athletes. More proof that audiences will engage with women's sports when given the chance. More leverage for leagues negotiating media rights deals. More inspiration for young girls who see someone who looks like them succeeding at the highest level. These are real, meaningful advancements that shouldn't be dismissed. The challenges are equally real. Resentment from players who feel overlooked. Pressure on Clark to represent all women perfectly. Backlash from people uncomfortable with change. Questions about whether individual success helps or hurts collective progress. Concerns about whether this is sustainable or a temporary spike. These challenges don't negate the opportunities. They just complicate them. History will judge this moment not by what happened on February 1st, but by what happens next. If Clark's NBC success opens doors for other women, if it leads to increased investment in women's basketball, if it changes how sports media approaches coverage, then it will be remembered as a breakthrough. If it remains an isolated achievement, a singular exception that doesn't translate to broader change, then it will be a missed opportunity. Right now, in early February 2026, we don't know which it will be. We're living through the moment, not looking back on it. What we do know is that Caitlyn Clark's debut on NBC's Basketball Night in America was more than a broadcast appearance. It was a statement, a demonstration, a challenge to assumptions about what's possible for women in sports media. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't apologize for taking up space. She just showed up and proved she belonged. And in doing so, she forced everyone watching to reconsider what they thought they knew about women's basketball, media representation, and the power of individual talent to shift entire industries. The WNBA can't ignore this. NBC won't forget what these numbers mean. And fans who discovered Caitlyn Clark on February 1st are now following her career, watching her games, and paying attention to women's basketball in ways they never did before. That's the Caitlyn Clark effect. Not just rating spikes or social media trends, but fundamental shifts in how people engage with the sport. And whether the basketball establishment is ready or not, that effect isn't going away. It's just getting started.